Welcome to the Transformer Unicorn Tales. I'm Katie, your ever transforming host. This is a podcast about awesome transformations, food, for thought, and occasionally unicorns. I am so excited that you're here listening to this. Let's get started. Hello and welcome back to a new episode of the podcast. I am super excited to do this episode because I think many of us, if not all of us, struggle with at one point or another in time. So I call this episode Less Consuming and More Creating, which is actually an Instagram post that I did like a few months ago now, I think. Which was the moment when I found the words to express this feeling. And so now I'm going to share what it is and then how I kind of try to tackle it lately. So yeah, how about I just share what I'm doing about, right? So it's a really big dark hole that we can all fall into sometimes, which is that we consume and consume and consume stuff. And when I say stuff, I don't necessarily just mean like material things like shopping or even just like window shopping, but that's also one of the things. But there's also this like information consuming these days. Like if you just go out in the world, there's like advertisements or just like, you need to buy this now or like deals and whatever sales, right? And there's also like consuming that we kind of willingly do. For example, watching series, listening to podcasts, scrolling on Instagram. And yes, I admit it's not as willing maybe sometimes as we want it to be, but still, we kind of choose to consume those things. Like you don't have to necessarily, right? But we do. And all that consuming can lead to make us feel like really insecure and tired, and like these thoughts of what can I possibly create now that is still new, right? And just to relate to the yoga world, I know that yoga teachers like automatically follow other yoga teachers on the socials, and then you're like, oh, this person is doing something similar, but then you don't actually enjoy their content. You just start to feel like, oh, so they're already doing this, so what can I possibly do now, right? Or on the other side of things, or like another view on this, is also how am I supposed to create something? Because there is like best times to post, use these hashtags, or the 3 ways to gain more followers, or you should never say these things in your posts. And like the best part is these like voices are also like contradicting each other, right? Like I'm pretty sure you've had that at one point or another. Like you should say this on your website. You should never say this on your website. And it's like, okay, so who am I supposed to listen to? So the moment you then sit down to create your own creation, your head is already filled with all of this stuff that you consumed. And there's just so much noise that you cannot possibly now create. So, what I have been playing with lately is this idea of cutting out the noise so that I can take up more space for myself. Because what I notice is that if I consume a lot and there's a lot of noise in my head, there's very little space for my own voice. So, even if I then create something, it's more just like what I should or probably what people would like to see, or me just forcing myself to create something, and it's not really me. So, the invitation with this episode is to try to cut out the noise, try to consume a little bit less of those things. And when you feel the need or have that itch, or you're just like, well, I don't know what else to do, so I'm just going to watch a series, to try to replace that with creation, with taking up your own space. And if you're now like, yeah, but if I'm tired and I just want to watch series, we're going to get into it in a moment. So, first off, I just want to acknowledge that, of course, there's time to consume. Because if you don't consume, you don't have new experiences, you don't have new things that you can then also share in your work, right? Like I always say, like, one of the easiest ways to come up with a new thing for your yoga classes is to just go for a walk, to just do groceries with a little bit more mindfulness or awareness, because then you all of a sudden like spark these new ideas, right? Like, I don't know, today we can focus on being patient in the yoga class or something, right? Because that's what you experienced in the grocery store when you were standing in line. And so that is also kind of consuming by being present in the world so that you take in that noise. But if you're honest, we do this way too much, right? There is like a huge imbalance between the amount we consume and the amount we create. And I hope by now it's clear that by creation, I don't just mean like producing stuff, but also just the basic taking up space for yourself. So now let's get to like my tips or what I want to share around this creation process. I think one really important thing that I already like hinted at is like your energy level. Because I know sometimes you're tired and we're like, I just want to watch a series. But what if instead of consuming like a lot, because in those situations, I also feel like we don't just like consume a yoga nidra. We don't just like consume a quick yoga class to calm us down or go for a short walk to like take up new experiences. We like binge watch something, right? Like there goes the whole evening. Or we don't just scroll for 5 minutes, we scroll for 30 minutes. So what if we can replace those things with little things as well? It doesn't have to be huge, because I think because we consume so much, we think that when we create, it has to be also big and a lot. But it doesn't. Sometimes taking up space and creating space for yourself is really just taking a deep breath. And that's already more than enough. You just created a nice deep breath for your body and you took up more space, right? And then let's say that's like, I couldn't come up with something smaller, but I think that's like a good start, right? And then you can take 5 breaths and then you can maybe write a little something in your journal. And then you can, like you can think as big as you want. You can make a whole new product. You can come up with a whole new retreat. And when it comes to like these bigger things, it doesn't have to happen overnight, or it doesn't have to happen in one go, right? And I think that's like a topic for another time where we talk about these bigger projects and how to like tackle them. But somehow I feel like when we're consuming, it's like okay to watch like a lot of series, or just like if you think about when you're scrolling on Instagram, if you watch 5 reels, that's like 5 different kind of inputs in a very short time. But you would never go, oh, so I just need a sales page, some marketing emails, some pictures, some text, and I don't even have a 5 for now from the top of my head. And you go like, okay, I can do that. Like, why not just like set up something new? So it can be made smaller, right? Like you can just today brainstorm and then tomorrow do something. Um, yeah, so that way you kind of can get the creation going and be mindful of your energy levels. And creation doesn't have to be big. And then taking up space for me is kind of like a synonym at this point in time to creation, because just by being you, you are already creating something in the world. I hope you're with me. So let me just say that again. Just by being you, you are already creating something in the world. And sometimes, like I already said, the creation doesn't have to be big. Sometimes it's literally just your awareness at something. So, for example, you can walk on the street and look at your phone and you're not aware of your surroundings. But as soon as you put yourself in that moment and you look around, maybe you see something and that sparks something in you, which is already kind of like creating something, right? Creating thoughts, creating, maybe you help someone cross the street. And then already we're not in that consuming mode, but creating mode. And I think what is really important is that we act. And action doesn't have to be big. Action can also just be awareness, because we are so passive. We are so used to just like, being in that bubble of like, just entertain me, internet, or just something happen already and entertain me because I don't know what to do myself. So we don't take up that space that we should be owning and should be like doing something with. Again, doesn't have to be huge, but it can be. Um, and then a little bit like a different perspective on this is also that sometimes we think that creation is also equal to creativity, but it's not. Like I said, a deep breath. It's your breath, can be whatever kind of breath. And it doesn't have to be creative and the most fancy, innovative, whatever breath, right? And if you want to be more creative, I think a really good start is to just steal something, copy something, and you add your own twist to it. So when you are consuming so much, when there's so much information already coming at us, creation doesn't necessarily have to be super original, because literally anything has been thought of before, unless you're making something whatever. But like, let's just be realistic, right? It doesn't have to be huge. What we need more of is just you and your twist on things, your thoughts around things, because no two people have the same experiences with stuff. So as soon as you're like, okay, that, I don't know, that piece of flow looks really cool, I love it, you can take it and put it into your own yoga class, and you will not use the same words. And I wanted to give an example. If you've been to one of my yoga classes, I often do the pasta dance, which is by now kind of like my signature move in yoga classes. And sometimes I hear teachers say, I'm going to use this in my class. And I'm always like, I think that's freaking awesome because I love this. And I hope you will do this to your students as well. And I hope you have like a different take on it, because I'm not perfect. And I'm not saying that my way is the perfect way to do this pasta dance in a yoga class, right? So as soon as another teacher takes this and they do it in their class, it will be totally different because they don't have my vibe, they don't have my voice, they don't have my cues. So it will feel different, it will look different, it will be different. Even though what they literally did is just stole my sequence. I'm doing like air quotes in case you're just listening to podcast and not watching me. They stole my sequence and they just copied it into their class. But it's already something new because it's coming from a totally different person. So do not feel bad about that. And another thing when it comes to like stealing other people's stuff, make sure that you do give credit where it's due. I think that's the least we should be doing. So I'm not behind like just randomly stealing stuff and being like, look at me being uncool. But if you copy someone, just be upfront about it and be like, this is not my original idea. And what I also wanted to add, it happened to me, well, not to me personally, but I was talking to a yoga teacher, and what happened is she came up with this really cool class, and then she was scrolling on her Instagram and she found this other teacher who was basically doing the same thing, but she didn't know. So she wasn't copying it. She just came up with it. But somehow in the back of her mind, of course, it came from that other person. So she was like, oh, so is this now like stealing from her, or is it my own class now? Because I'm kind of doing the same thing, but also not. And that can happen. It can happen that you like consume something a long time ago and now you're like came up with this best idea, then you realize, oh, actually it's not really my idea. And I think that's totally fine. And it's also okay to just say that, like, I came up with this last week, but actually you know it has been done before. And never ever think that people will like think you're a fraud or think you're like, oh, so I'm not going to do it with you because you're just like a copy. I'm going to do it with the original person. Because again, we're different people. Different people like different vibes. Um, yeah, so that was like a big thing for just creativity and what to do when you don't feel creative. And then I have one more thing to mention for this list of creations is that when you consume, there's also a lot of bad or just heavy stuff out there. And I want to acknowledge that. So I know that some people in the world that we live in right now find it really hard to create because they feel like nothing really covers or is justified even to be put out into the world. It's like, who am I to now share a pasta dance on Instagram with people when other people are suffering so much somewhere else, right? Like, should I not be creating something relevant? Let's say, again, air quotes. Or I just feel so heavy by consuming all of this stuff. How can I even create now when I feel so heavy? And I just want to acknowledge that feeling, right? Because that happens. I also have that feeling. I usually don't share heavy stuff on my platforms. Simply that's just my choice. But I also do feel sometimes like, even if I don't share about it, I should maybe somehow include it or acknowledge it or create awareness for in my on my platforms, right? Um, so I try to do that in a way that fits me, and I would invite you to do that as well. And when it comes to these heavy things, I think again, the most important first step is to create space for yourself. So when there's like all this heaviness coming at you, like when you're just consuming all that heavy stuff, make sure that you first create space for yourself. Like I'm rubbing my heart now. That's like some just an automatic reaction when I feel like that, so that I can breathe and I can think and I can create from that space and not from like, this is like so much happening and like I have to react now. So it's not necessarily a reaction, but more like just sharing from your heart more. Um, and to like give a more concrete example, I sometimes see yoga teachers, but also just other people in general, when there's like again this huge news wave of something really terrible happening in the world, that they just like post like a lot about that stuff and they just like keep resharing the bad things, right? And for me, yes, you're creating awareness, but you're not supporting me in whatever you're sending my way, and you don't add anything to it. So then where is this going, right? You're just consuming and just like keep sending it straight on, and there's no space creation. For me it feels like that, right? There is no, okay, I actually stopped for a second and now I'm sharing this because, or I'm not sharing this because. And I think we need a little bit more of that, because sometimes the world just feels so heavy, and if you just keep spreading that heaviness, it's not necessarily gonna get better. So take care of yourself, create space for yourself, and then decide how you can transform the heavy stuff into something that also includes you, if that makes sense, right? and and I'm not saying that anyone is doing it wrong, right, by just resharing stuff, because maybe that's all you have energy for. um but yeah, so when the world feels heavy, do not feel obligated to react, to share, because I don't think that necessarily is helpful always, right? Because there can be like really big emotions involved as well, and they sometimes come out in the wrong way. Like one of my coaches said, if you go if you go on your socials and you have really big emotions, maybe first talk to your therapist and then share. Um, she also said, like, maybe you shouldn't be crying on Instagram. and I think it's true. Like, if you don't have the words first, then maybe take time to find the words within you and then share the heavy stuff. Okay, that was like a lot of stuff. So I'm just going to summarize what we've been talking about today so that you have some concrete things that you can hopefully take with you. So we've been focusing on less consuming, more creating. And what I mean by consuming is really just like letting the world come at us, like just passively letting everything come over us. And what mean by creation is really just taking up your space in the world and just being present. And then from that space, creating whatever you want to create. And so, what I've been sharing about is your energy level. Make sure that you know how much energy you have to create, to take up space. And sometimes it can be just a deep breath, and sometimes it can be a whole weekend retreat or whatever that you want to create. And just by being you, you are already creating something in the world, and that is more than enough. And yeah, I think that's also just a great place to end, actually. So yeah, if you're not, if you're feeling heavy, if you're feeling not creative, or you're feeling who am I to do this stuff, make sure that you just show up as you, that you create space and take your space. And that is, again, more than enough. Don't ever feel like you have to do more, you have to be more original, or you have to create and fix all the problems in the world. Yeah, you are more than enough just as you are. Okay, thank you for listening to this episode. And yeah, if I'm right, I will be back next week actually. So just letting you know, there will be a new episode next week, hopefully. So I will see you then. I think you're awesome. Bye bye.